everyone and welcome to this video. Now today I have decided to revisit a series what I've done a couple of months ago now, maybe getting on for a year now, on my channel. The series was called A Year of Music, and basically I looked at any particular year of albums, and that I went through the different releases of that year from my collection, and any other important musical events what happened. Right, so today I'm going to be looking at 1983 for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because I recently got this magazine here. It's called The History of Rock for 1983 here, and basically this is just archive articles from the Enemy and Melody Maker magazines, and that you just got different articles and stuff from it. Quite interesting read here. There's a bit about the Style Council and that. So yeah, this was one of the reasons why I decided to focus on 1983 today. The other is because currently on BBC 4 they're showing reruns of Top of the Pops weekly editions of the chart show. So it is quite interesting to see what was popular in 1983, what was happening with the charts and whatnot. So basically the way I will structure this video is I'll start by showing some albums which maybe wouldn't feature in most people's best of 1983 list, but they are by some of my favourite artists. Then I will talk about two brand new bands formed in 1983, both two of my favourite bands. And then I will go through some of the more acclaimed albums from that year. Although I won't be ranking them in this video, I'll just be going through them talking about each album. So I will begin with the obvious one for me. It is Paul McCartney, my favourite artist ever. In 1983, he put out the album Pipes of Peace, which, yeah, this isn't one of his finest works. Kind of this was the leftovers of Tug of War, which is a amazing album right there. This though is kind of the outtakes from that the leftovers and stuff, but wasn't good enough, and you can kind of tell there is a little bit of filler on here. But then again, there are also two massive number one hits, the title song and Say Say Say, very famous duet with Michael Jackson. So yeah, not a bad album from Paul here, just unfortunately not one of his finest. So now for a band who were massive in the 70s, however by this point in time they were starting to decline a little bit by 1983. I'm talking about ELO. In 1983, they released the album Secret Messages, and by this point in time, Jeff Lynne was a little bit fed up with ELO. He wanted just to finish off their contract. They only had 2 albums left. He made this double album, very very ambitious piece of work. However, the record company refused to release it, so Jeff Lynne was forced to cut it down and make it into a single album, and this is what we got, and it is a little bit messy. I mean, there are some really good songs in here, such as the title track and Bluebird. It is probably my favourite on here. Four Little Diamonds, Danger Ahead. There's some great stuff here, but some of the songs they took out were just puzzling because they are really really great stuff. There's one called Hello My Old Friend, which is this really long song about growing up in Birmingham, and that really really amazing track there. Buildings Have Eyes would become a B-side. That's also fantastic. Yeah, on here we get something like Letter from Spain, which is probably ELO's worst song what they ever put out. So yeah, again, not a bad album here from ELO, just not one off their career best. It's nothing compared to Out the Blue or Discovery, or even Time, the album before this. Next one though is probably one of my favourites from 1983, and definitely would be the most underrated album released this year. I'm talking about Paul Simon's Hearts and Bones here. Now kind of the story goes with this album was that Paul Simon reunited with Art Garfunkel for a brief time in the early 80s, went out on tour. And they were set to make an album together, so they started work on this material here. However, they fell out during the making of it. Art Garfunkel walked out on the sessions, and his contributions were wiped. So when this was released, it was seen as a disappointment. It didn't sell anything really. I think it failed to chart pretty much everywhere. It was seen as Paul Simon's kind of career low point before the bounce back that was Graceland. However, for me, I think that the material on here is really good. We have tracks like Hearts and Bones, just a beautiful song there. Think Too Much, Renee and Georgette Magritte, the late great Johnny Ace, The Omnia Allergies is fantastic as well. Like again, like he's like expanding his sound like a little bit, like all like this album sounds a little bit different to that One Trick Pony and like Still Crazy after all these years. And like I'm sure like most Paul Simon fans like agree that this is like one of like his very best albums. However, just didn't get like anywhere near like enough attention like when it came out. So yeah, that's Hearts and Bones here. Next one now, like I was debating like whether to like include this one like at all like in this video, but like I decided that I would. Like I mean, like it is like a proper studio album. Like it is this. It's by Pete Townsend. It's called Scoop. And basically what this is like sort of like archive demos, like what he made like in his home studio, and like this is really interesting. Like some of like these demos are just fantastic stuff because like he play like all like the instruments himself, like he had his home studio and that. So yeah, some really fantastic stuff here. Really like great insight like into like a musical genius at work. Next one, like I just wanted to mention, like unfortunately, like I haven't got a copy of it, is Elvis Costello's album Punch the Clock, what came out in 1983. So yeah, like as I said, I haven't got a copy of it, so I haven't heard it like all the way through, but it does have a couple of like hit singles on it, such as Every Day I Write the Book. I think Pills and Soap was also like a single as well, like as was Shipbuilding, which would become like a big hit for like Robert Wyatt like in like 1983. So yeah, like I would quite like to pick up that album like sometime in like the near future. Another band now who were pretty big in like the 70s, they had I think like 3 like UK like #1 singles and that, like 10cc. Like in 1983 they released this album called Windows in the Jungle, and this was definitely like not a hit for them. Like 10cc declined very quickly like in like the late 70s, like early 80s, and like by this point like I don't think that anyone really cared about them like anymore. This would also be like the band's like last album release for like I think about like 9 or 10 years. So yeah, not a very good album here though. 10cc, Windows in the Jungle. Another slightly weaker album that came out this year from like one of like the biggest bands like ever was Pink Floyd's. Like they released the album The Final Cut, or like probably rather Roger Waters like released the album The Final Cut like using Pink Floyd's name, because yeah, this is a very kind of like Waters heavy album. Like some of like these songs, like it's kind of got like this sort of like anti-war theme like going on in it. A lot of these songs just don't do anything for me. Like I think like the only one I quite like is like Not Now John. That's a pretty good song, probably because David Gilmour sings it, but yeah, not a brilliant album here. Very difficult one to listen to here. But by this point like in time, like Pink Floyd could like release anything like and like it would be commercially successful. Like I think that this album like got to #1 like as well. Like Madness I know because it isn't very good. So now another album by like a older like sort of 60s band, but this one like is like really good though. It is the Kinks and State of Confusion. And like by this point like in time, like the Kinks were like experiencing like somewhat like off like a comeback in like the UK and like the biggest ever success like in America. So like on here we've got the hits Come Dancing, which is a really great song here. Some of the brilliant tracks like as well. Haven't listened to this one like in a little while though, so it is a little bit hard for me to like pass judgment like on it. But like from what I remember, this was a really fantastic album here, the Kinks and State of Confusion. Another release from this year was by Billy Joel. He put out the album An Innocent Man, and this is one of like Joel's like more like accessible, more like poppy albums. This is a really fun listen. Like I mean we have got some like just like real fun like upbeat pop songs such as Uptown Girl, Tell Her About It, like An Innocent Man, The Longest Time. So yeah, some really good like highlights I've got like on here like as well. Like very different like direction like for Joe, like coming after like the quite serious like the Iron Curtain album, and like kind of like throughout it like has like a sort of like a throwback sound like to like the 1950s and 60s like the music what like Joe like grew up with and that. Yeah, just a really fun, really upbeat album here. Next thing like I wanted to talk about, it wasn't like an album, but like a 12-inch single what came out like in 1983. It is Blue Monday by New Order. Now like they also put out like an album like in 1983 called Power, Corruption and Lies. Like however this song like wasn't on like that album like for whatever reason. But this is for me like their crowning achievement. Like Blue Monday, just such a pioneering song. Like I mean it's got like that sort of like the electronic music sound. Very, very new like at the time. They kind of like invented what like we now know like as dance music. And this song like has got like such like a charm to it like as well. Like it does sound a little bit dated, but it is just so cool like with like all like the sound effects and like the beat and like everything. Like it is a brilliant track here. This is also like the best selling like 12-inch single like of all time like ever. Like this like original version is like just fantastic. Not massive like on like the later remixes like off it though, but you really like can't beat like the original version of Blue Monday. But now I did just want to quickly mention like a couple of like new bands like it formed in 1983. Starting off with probably one of the most important bands like off like this decade. It is the Smiths. Like I've got like the debut album here. However, this came out I think in like early 1984. Like however, like in like 1983 they like released like the first two singles, which were Hand in Glove and This Charming Man. The latter especially is just such a perfect pop song there. Yeah, fantastic stuff. And like yeah, like as I said, like although they wouldn't like do like the debut album like until like 1984, like 1983 was like a very important year for them because they formed like in 1983. They started gigging, like they had like the first like singles and like the first like chart success and like Top of the Pops appearance with This Charming Man. So yeah, great success there like for the Smiths, like really like just sort of building like their fan base and that throughout 1983. The other new band who like I wanted to mention was the Style Council. Now these were like formed like after like Paul Weller disbanded the Jam like in 1982, and like very quickly like after that like he got like this new project like up and running. The Style Council released 4 singles in 1983. I'll just like quickly show you them now. First one was Speak Like a Child here. Amazing song there, absolutely fantastic stuff there. Then later in the year they put out Money Go Round here. This is parts 1 and 2 here, the 7-inch single. In like the summer of that year they done the Paris EP, which has for me 2 of Paul Weller's greatest songs ever, Log Got Summer and the Paris Match. Absolutely fantastic stuff. And then towards the end, I think November time, they released A Solid Bond in Your Heart. Just a fantastic tune there as well. So yeah, 4 like fantastic singles there, like maybe like except like Money Go Round, but that's not one of like my favourite like Weller singles and that. But the other 3 are all absolutely stunning, like all like very different, very distinctive songs. Although like no like album was released like in 1983, the debut one came out in like springtime of 1984. But like, yeah, like as I said, like I absolutely love like the early Style Council stuff. Just some of like the best songs like off Weller's whole career, like right there. But now I'm just going to move on with like slightly more so like typical like 1983 albums. What would be on like most people's like best off lists like off like the year. So I'll start with this one here. It is U2's album War. Now like I bought this one like after like recommendation like from James Lobban, and like also after hearing the Joshua Tree like as well, like the slightly like more acclaimed like Joshua Tree album. However, for me this album was quite a little bit better, like I thought. Like has more like of an indie like rock sound to it, a little bit more toughness, slightly more like harder edge like to like the material on here. Favourite songs were like Seconds, New Year's Day. I think I quite like Red Light and Surrender like as well. Like, well, I have to give this album like another listen like as well, because it has been quite a while since I played it. But yeah, just a brilliant album. Like the first like commercial hit like as well, like Sunday Bloody Sunday would become one of their most popular songs. Like another like one of like biggest albums from that year was the last one from The Police, Synchronicity here. So yeah, they would split up like later in 1983. However, for me this was a great way to round off their career. It has a little bit more like variety like of sound than some of like The Police's like other albums. But like that's like one thing like with like some of like the work, like it does sound very similar. However, for me on here there is quite a bit of like variety, like especially like the second side of this album like is just perfect. Perfection. We have like Every Breath You Take, King of Pain, Wrapped Around Your Finger, and Tea in the Sahara to close. I think all of them songs like are on like the Greatest Hits album. So yeah, like a really great way to like end like their career. Like I think like this is like this is often considered like the Police's best album. Next one now, what I want to talk about is Let's Dance by David Bowie. Now, after like a unusually long gap, like since Scary Monsters, like some like 3 years, like before this album, like Bowie came back, like kind of like out of nowhere, really, with like a brand new image and like a brand new sound as well. Songs like very much like off their time, like commercially. This is just a whole heap of fun. Like it isn't like looked back on like as like one of like his most like artistically like fruitful like periods like albums, but for me it's just fun like innocent music, and like it kind of like introduced like David Bowie to like a brand new audience who were maybe turned off by like some of like his more like flamboyant like work like previous, and that like this one here kind of just like cemented like his like reputation as like one of like the very best like singers and like performers around. So yeah, that's Let's Dance. Brilliant tracks on here such as Modern Love, China Girl, the title song, and like some other great ones on that side too as well. So now I have saved like my personal favourite like off the year like to the end of the video. Then I'm talking about Tears for Fears and The Hurting here. For me, the best album of 1983. Very rarely like does a band like make its like first album like where like they are at like their artistic peak. And for me, the only other example like would be the Stone Roses like with their debut album. For me, this is Tears for Fears' best album like what they ever done, like, and like their debut album as well. Like came like out of nowhere. It's really like they were in like a band like before, like however like I don't think that they had like much success. So yeah, like Roland and Kurt like come out with some amazing songs such as Mad World, Pale Shelter, Suffer the Children, Change, Start the Breakdown. Amazing songs. Slightly like darker like lyrically this album, and like the music is just very powerful, like very like thought-provoking like songs like on here. Yeah, amazing piece of work here. So yeah, that is me done with this video. Like I hope you have enjoyed it. I would like to know what like you think like of like 1983 like music wise, like what was some of like your favorite albums and that, like also like if like you'd like to maybe do like some more like of these videos, like maybe like pick a year, and then like I'll see what like I can do like choosing like albums like from that collection like from that year. So yeah, I hope you have enjoyed, and I will see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.